Hello everyone, and welcome to a behind-the-scenes look at my latest project. Before we get started, please keep in mind that I have not been to any programming classes or anything like that. Most of this is just stuff that I've learned myself, so it's quite likely that I could be wrong on some of this. So this is what's triggered whenever the game is started. What you're doing here is you're getting the information about the monitor that the person is running. Then you're setting up an array with that information right here, and then you're using the information within the array to center the window right here and resize and move it and so forth. So don't be intimidated by this, it's quite simple. Just imagine that if you just had this divided by 2 and this divided by 2, just imagine that there's a cross being drawn across the screen, and it's not really triangulating because there's there's only 2 lines, but this divides the monitor into 2 both horizontally and vertically, and by subtracting right here the width and the height, you're just displacing the window, each pixel of the width and the height, so that it appears to be in the center of the screen. So if we ran like this, I assume that the window would be over here, or over here, or over here, somewhere across some side of the screen, and as you can see, it's down here. And then, so now if I put this all back to the way that it was before, and then I save and run again, you'll see that the window's in the center of the screen as opposed to one of the sides. I haven't tested this for myself, so it's only theory, but I could imagine that if you're using dual monitors, that this particular use of this script could just put the application in between the 2 monitors, which wouldn't be very user-friendly. Now, next what happens whenever you run the program is it checks to make sure that the save file exists. And basically I just have a big if statement set up to where if the folder exists, it checks for the file. If the file doesn't exist, then it tells you that the file doesn't exist, and it loads the first town. If the file exists but it's empty, then it loads the first town. Otherwise, it loads the save. And if the folder doesn't exist, then it just loads the first town. And that's all necessary to make sure that there isn't an error anywhere. This is the portion of the script that's run whenever you use a potion. The reason it's so long is because you have to account for whether the potion heals for less than its full effect, because the player doesn't require 50 healing, or if it heals for the full effect, if the player is missing more than 50 health. You also have to ensure that the player is missing some amount of health, which is done at the beginning. And then you also have to make sure that the player still has a potion, and that they still have a turn. So, this is the subroutine that's called whenever you press the attack button, and basically that randomizes the seed so that it's not the same randomization every time, it's a different seed. Then it calculates the damage here, and then this ensures that the player still has a turn left, like they can still perform an action, and this calculates whether it's a critical hit. The 23 doesn't mean anything, it's just a random number I picked. If it's greater than 23, then it's a critical hit. Otherwise, it's just regular damage. And then, basically, this subtracts this number from the enemy HP, and then it makes the enemy HP this number. So next what happens is the subroutine ensures that the enemy HP is greater than 1, otherwise the enemy HP is equal to 0. Now this is to ensure that you don't get negative numbers in the enemy HP, because that wouldn't make much sense. You can't really, I guess it would be considered overkill, but anyway, and then this subtracts this subtracts 1 from the player turn dot value and does the same thing that we did up here, which is set the number of turns to the new number. And this ensures that basically what this does is if the player turn is greater than 0, then it goes to pause, which just creates a blank screen in between the actions, because otherwise this would just be a blur. You wouldn't be able to really see what was going on very well, or it just wouldn't look very good. Next, we ensure that the player has more than one turn, and if not, then the enemy, which in this case was a rat, gets a turn. And that's basically the attack subroutine. Next, let's take a look at how I did the lightning animation, or technically it wasn't an animation, it was just changing the colors of the text, but eventually it would be an animation. So, the way that I did the animations before, if I can find it, okay good, I marked it, is I would just do the animations. I would go frame by frame, every time, frame by frame by frame, and of course that took quite a while, probably about an hour for this, just copying and pasting and changing a value. Really boring. But for this one, I actually got smart, and I decided to do something different, which is, basically, I have, if timer value, which in this case is 5, is less than 0, or greater than 0 rather, sorry, it's greater than 0, then it does the animation, and every time it does the animation, it subtracts 1 from this number. So this basically allows me to set how many times I want the actions in here to take place. So after the color is changed 5 times, or actually in this case it's 6 times, then it will perform this action, and the animation is over. Obviously, this didn't take quite as long as the other, which is great. I'll probably use this in the future. Next, let's take a look at the saving system. So, the first thing we do whenever we create the save is we actually create the folder that the save will be created in. Now, as you can see here, if the folder does not exist, then it asks you if you want to create the folder. Now, if you answer yes, which is 6, then it will create the folder in the path, which in this case is the root of C, which I'm not sure if I'll keep it that way, but for now that's how it is. So next, after the folder has been, we create the save file. After the save file is created, the program writes a value into the save based on what area you're in. The same is true for items. Based on what items you have, the program writes data into the file. And that should conclude the behind-the-scenes look at my latest project.